You just signed the articles. Your name, Thomas Miller, 19 years old, former merchant sailor, is now written on a piece of parchment alongside 120 other names. And that signature just made you a pirate. You're standing on the deck of the Royal Fortune, Captain Bartholomew Roberts' flagship, the most feared pirate vessel in the Caribbean, in this year of our Lord 1721. And you think this is going to be the adventure of your life. You've heard the stories. Everyone's heard the stories. Pirates live free, answer to no one, sail where they want, take what they want, bury treasure on secret islands, drink rum all day, fight with swords like gentlemen, and retire rich. You signed those articles because you were tired of the brutal discipline on merchant ships, tired of officers beating you for minor infractions, tired of working yourself to exhaustion for wages that barely kept you fed. The pirates who recruited you in Port Royal told you about democracy aboard pirate ships, about how every man gets a vote and an equal share, about how there are no aristocrats giving orders, just free men making their own choices. And that sounded so good, so much better than the life you were living, that you signed without really thinking about what you were signing away. In the next 24 hours, from this dawn to tomorrow's dawn, you're going to discover that everything you believed about pirate life was a lie. Not entirely a lie, because the democracy part is actually true, but a lie in every other way that matters. You're going to experience the reality that Hollywood never shows you, the truth that the romantic stories carefully omit, the horror that makes pirate life expectancy roughly 2 years after going on the account. Welcome aboard the Royal Fortune. Try not to die on your first day. But before we step aboard this ship together, before you experience what it really meant to be a pirate in the Golden Age, I need you to do something. If you're settling in for this story, if you're ready to spend the next 45 minutes discovering the brutal truth behind the romantic myths, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'm not interested in empty subscriptions. I want people who actually care about historical truth, who want their myths destroyed with deeply researched narratives, who appreciate immersive storytelling that doesn't sugarcoat the past. If that's you, subscribe now. And while you're at it, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there right now. I want to know if you're in New York at midnight, or London at 5 in the morning, or Sydney in the afternoon, or somewhere else entirely. Drop your location and your local time in the comments right now, because I'm genuinely curious about who's here, who's interested in the real history of piracy, who's willing to have their illusions shattered. Now dim the lights wherever you are. Get comfortable in that chair or that bed. Pull up those blankets if you have them. And let yourself remain standing here for a moment longer, here on the deck of the Royal Fortune in the Caribbean dawn of 1721. Because once this story begins to move, once we follow Thomas through his first day as a pirate, there's no stepping back out of it until dawn tomorrow. You're committed now. You've signed the articles just like Thomas did. Let's see if you survive the day. It's June 1721, and you're somewhere in the Caribbean Sea between Barbados and Hispaniola, hunting for merchant vessels to plunder. The sun is just starting to rise over the eastern horizon, turning the ocean from black to deep blue, and you can already feel the heat building even though it's barely past dawn. The Royal Fortune is a captured merchant ship that Captain Roberts took 6 months ago and converted into his flagship. She's got 32 guns, 3 masts, and she's fast enough to catch almost any merchant vessel and dangerous enough to fight off most naval ships if she has to. There are 120 men aboard right now, which is actually undermanned because Roberts lost 40 crew members in a battle with a Portuguese man-of-war 3 weeks ago, and those 40 dead men are why Roberts is recruiting in ports and why you got accepted so easily, even though you're young and inexperienced. Pirates need constant replacement crew because they die constantly. Disease, combat, accidents, executions after capture, there are so many ways to die as a pirate that the average life expectancy after signing the articles is about 2 years. You don't know this yet. You're about to learn it. As the story begins to move, as we follow you hour by hour through your first day aboard this ship, you're going to smell things you've never smelled, see things you wish you hadn't seen, and understand why the romantic pirate myth is one of history's most successful lies. This is the real thing. This is what it actually meant to go on the account. Let's see if you can survive even one day.
The first thing you need to understand about pirate ships is that Hollywood has lied to you about absolutely everything. Forget the Pirates of the Caribbean aesthetic where ships are clean and crews are charming rogues with good teeth and theatrical sword fights. Forget the idea of dashing captains in fancy coats standing at the wheel giving dramatic orders. Forget buried treasure and walking the plank and yo-ho-ho and a bottle of rum and all of it. The reality of pirate ships in 1721 is disease, filth, violence, hunger, thirst, fear, and exhaustion, punctuated by brief moments of terror during combat and brief moments of drunken chaos in port. Most of your time as a pirate will be spent doing back-breaking labor on a ship that smells like death, eating food that's rotting, drinking water that's contaminated, sleeping in conditions that would horrify a medieval peasant, and trying not to get sick with one of the dozen diseases that are constantly circulating through the crew. Because if you get sick enough to be useless, you're getting left behind at the next port with no money and no way home. This is freedom. This is rebellion against authority. This is the choice you just made when you signed those articles and joined Captain Bartholomew Roberts' crew. And right now, at dawn on your first full day as a pirate, you still think this was a good decision. You still think this is going to be better than merchant service. You still believe the myths. Let's start destroying those myths one by one, hour by hour, until you understand exactly what you've gotten yourself into. By dawn tomorrow, you'll know the truth. The question is whether you'll survive long enough to see that second dawn. Most pirates do survive their first day. It's the accumulated days, the diseases and wounds and disasters that pile up over months and years that kill you. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Right now it's 4 in the morning on your first full day as a pirate, and someone is shaking you awake in your hammock, and your new life is about to begin, whether you're ready for it or not.
4 o'clock in the morning, and you wake up to someone shaking your hammock and shouting, "On deck, you lazy dogs!" And you open your eyes to total darkness except for one dim lantern swinging from a beam. And the first thing you experience before you even see anything, before you're fully conscious, is the smell. The smell hits you like a physical force, makes you gag, makes you understand immediately that you're not on a merchant ship anymore, because merchant ships smell bad, but this is something else entirely. This is the smell of 120 men who haven't bathed in weeks or months, sleeping in a space designed for maybe 40, all of them sweating in Caribbean heat, all of them wearing clothes that haven't been washed since they put them on, all of them pissing in buckets that get dumped once a day if you're lucky. But that's not even the worst of it. The worst smell is coming from below, from the bilge, which is the very bottom of the ship where all liquid collects. Seawater that leaks through the hull, rainwater that drips through the decks, vomit from seasick crew members, blood from injuries, and worse things that you don't want to think about. The bilge water is maybe 3 feet deep right now, and it's been sitting there festering in tropical heat for weeks, and the smell of it permeates everything, gets into your clothes and your hair and your lungs, and there's nothing you can do about it except get used to it or spend your entire time on this ship feeling like you're about to vomit. This is where you sleep. This is the gun deck, the middle deck of the ship where the cannons are mounted, and at night the crew slings hammocks between the cannons and sleeps in shifts because there's not enough space for everyone to sleep at once. Your hammock is touching the hammocks on either side of you, literally touching. You can feel the men on both sides shifting in their sleep, and there's maybe 18 inches between your hammock and the hammock above you, so if the ship rolls hard, you'll slam into each other. The hammock itself is canvas that's been used by probably a dozen different pirates before you, and it hasn't been washed ever, and you can feel things crawling in it. Lice, fleas, bedbugs. They're biting you right now, have been biting you all night, and you'll be scratching these bites for days, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it, because every hammock on the ship is the same. Every inch of this ship is crawling with parasites, and you're just going to have to accept that being constantly bitten by insects is part of your new life now.
You swing out of your hammock and immediately step in something wet. Someone vomited during the night. The ship was rolling in rough seas and seasickness is constant, and no one bothered to clean it up. So now you're barefoot in vomit in total darkness trying to find your shoes, which are somewhere in this chaos of 120 men trying to wake up and get on deck at the same time. You find your shoes eventually. They're damp because everything on this ship is damp from the humidity and the sea spray, and you shove your feet into them and they squelch. And you don't want to think about whether that dampness is water or something worse. The man who was shaking hammocks is moving through the gun deck with his lantern, and in that swinging light, you can see your new crewmates for the first time in daylight, and they are not the dashing rogues you imagined. These are men who've been at sea for months. Their hair is long and matted with salt and grease. Their beards are full of food scraps and God knows what else. Their clothes are stiff with dried sweat and salt water, torn and stained and rotting on their bodies. Their teeth, and this is the thing that strikes you most, their teeth are black or brown or just missing entirely, because scurvy and poor diet and no dental care means that most pirates over 30 have lost half their teeth, and the ones remaining are diseased and painful. The man nearest you grins at you. He's maybe 40, which is ancient for a pirate, and you can see that he's got maybe 6 teeth left, and his gums are a disturbing grayish color that you later learn means advanced scurvy. "First day, eh?" he says, his voice rough and wet sounding. "You'll get used to it, or you'll die. One or the other, mate." This is your welcome to pirate life. This is the reality that the stories never mention. You climb the ladder up to the main deck and emerge into the pre-dawn darkness, and the air up here is better, actual fresh air instead of the cesspit smell of the gun deck, but it's already hot and humid, and you're sweating through your shirt before you've been awake 5 minutes. The sky is starting to lighten in the east, and you can see the silhouette of the ship's rigging against it, and you can see the shapes of other crew members moving around in the darkness. And somewhere, someone is coughing with a deep, wet rattle that sounds like death, and you wonder if you just made the biggest mistake of your life. 5 o'clock and the sun is rising, and you're learning what breakfast means on a pirate ship. And this is where another myth dies hard and ugly. You thought pirates feasted. You thought there'd be fresh food and plenty of rum, and maybe even some of that treasure you've heard about being spent on good provisions. What you get instead is this: ship's biscuit, which is also called hardtack, which is basically flour and water baked into a brick so hard you could use it as a weapon. The biscuit in your hand is probably 6 months old, maybe older, and when you bite into it, you hear something crunch, and you feel something move in your mouth, and you spit it out, and there are weevils. Little white larvae that were living in the biscuit that you just bit into, that are now crawling on your palm. The old pirate next to you, the one with 6 teeth, laughs at your expression. "Extra protein, boy! Eat 'em! You'll be grateful for the protein when the scurvy sets in and you can't keep anything else down." You look at the biscuit in your hand and you can see more weevils, little holes where they've been tunneling through the hardtack, and you understand that this is your choice. Eat the weevils or go hungry. You eat the weevils. You bite into the biscuit and you crunch through the larvae, and you try not to think about what you're chewing, and you wash it down with water from the barrel, except the water is green, actually green with algae growing in it, and it tastes like the wood of the barrel, and like rot, and like things you don't want to identify, but it's the only water there is, and you're thirsty, so you drink it.
Along with the weevil-infested biscuit, you get a piece of salt beef, which sounds better than it is because this beef has been preserved in salt for so long that it's turned brown and hard and stringy, and when you bite into it, the salt burns your mouth so badly that you need more of that disgusting water to wash it down. This is breakfast, every day, for as long as you're a pirate. The old hands eat without comment, mechanically chewing their weevil biscuit and salt beef, drinking the green water, and you realize they're not even tasting it anymore. They've just accepted that food on a pirate ship is fuel, nothing more, something to keep you alive rather than something to enjoy.
After breakfast, there's the rum ration. And this is the one part of the pirate myth that's actually true, except it's not what you thought it would be. Each crew member gets 1 cup of rum in the morning, but it's been watered down significantly, 1 part rum to 3 parts water, because the officers learned a long time ago that if you give sailors full-strength rum all day, they'll be too drunk to work or fight. But if you give them watered rum in the morning, it keeps them from mutinying without making them useless. You drink your watered rum, and it barely gives you a buzz, just enough to take the edge off the taste of the weevils and the rotten beef and the green water, just enough to make you feel slightly less miserable about your situation. This is it. This is your rum ration for the day. You were imagining pirates drinking rum all day, constantly drunk and singing sea shanties, but the reality is 1 cup of weak rum in the morning and then water, disgusting green water, for the rest of the day. And the reason they water the rum becomes clear as you look around at your crewmates. These men need to be functional. They need to be able to climb rigging and handle sails and fire cannons and fight if necessary, and you can't do any of that drunk. The watered rum is just enough to keep morale from completely collapsing while keeping the crew sober enough to work. This is the calculated balance that keeps a pirate ship operating. Not romance, not adventure, just the minimum alcohol required to prevent total despair while maintaining functionality. You finish your rum ration, and you're still thirsty, but there's nothing else. So you go back to the green water barrel and drink more of that rot-flavored liquid, and you try not to think about what's growing in it and what diseases you're probably ingesting with every swallow. 6 o'clock, and the sun is fully up now, and you're standing on deck for morning inspection. And this is where you get to actually see your crewmates in daylight. And it's worse than you imagined in the pre-dawn darkness. The man standing next to you is missing his nose. Not injured, where part of his nose has gone completely missing, just 2 holes in the center of his face where his nose used to be. You try not to stare, but he notices you looking, and he grins that black-toothed grin and says, "Syphilis." Ate right through it. You'll want to be careful in port, boy. The prostitutes will give you diseases that make you wish you'd stayed celibate. His name is William, and he used to be a Royal Navy sailor before he deserted and turned pirate. And the disease that ate his nose is slowly eating the rest of him too, but he'll probably die in combat or from drinking before the syphilis finishes him off, so he's not too worried about it. Next to William is Marcus, a former slave who escaped a Jamaican sugar plantation 5 years ago and joined the pirates because it was the only place in the entire world where a black man could be treated as an equal to white men, could vote on ship's business, could earn the same shares as anyone else. Marcus's back is covered in scars from whippings, and when he takes off his shirt to work, you can see the raised welts that crisscross his skin, some of them so deep and old that they've formed permanent ridges. He doesn't talk about the plantation much, but you understand that whatever horrors exist on this pirate ship, they're better than what he escaped from, which tells you something about how bad plantation slavery was in 1721. There's One-Eyed Jack, who lost his eye to a splinter during a battle 2 years ago when a cannonball hit the mast next to him and sent a foot-long piece of wood through his eye socket. The socket never healed properly, and it weeps constantly, and he has to wipe the discharge away with a rag that he keeps tucked in his belt. And the sight of him doing this makes you want to vomit, but you keep it down because showing weakness on your first day is not a good idea. There's Samuel the surgeon, who's drunk at 6 in the morning and will stay drunk all day, and you'll later learn that he stays drunk because the things he has to do as ship's surgeon, the amputations without anesthesia, the treating of diseases he doesn't understand, the watching men die from wounds he can't fix, would drive him insane if he stayed sober. And there's Anne,
who everyone calls by her male name of Andy, and who you don't realize is a woman disguised as a man until much later, because she's good enough at the disguise and competent enough at the work that no one questions it. And competence is what keeps you alive on a pirate ship, regardless of what gender you are. 7 o'clock, and you get your first work assignment. And this is where you learn that pirate democracy doesn't mean you get to do whatever you want. It means you get to vote on where the ship goes and whether to attack targets and who's captain. But someone still has to do the shit work. And new crew members get the worst jobs until they prove themselves. Your job for today is bilge pumping. You're going to spend the next 2 hours in the lowest part of the ship pumping out the bilge water that's been accumulating and festering down there. And when the quartermaster tells you this, you actually don't understand how bad this is going to be until you climb down the ladder into the darkness below the gun deck and the smell hits you like a punch to the face. This is where that smell was coming from, the smell that permeates the entire ship. And down here in the bilge, it's concentrated to the point where you literally cannot breathe without gagging. The bilge water is black, completely opaque, and it's maybe 3 feet deep, sloshing around down here in the dark. This water is seawater that's leaked through the hull, mixed with rainwater, mixed with everything that drips down from the decks above. Vomit, blood, urine, food scraps. You don't even want to know what else. It's been sitting down here in tropical heat for weeks, and it's basically a bacteria soup. And you're going to be standing in it for 2 hours working a hand pump to get it out of the ship. You lower yourself into the black water and it comes up to your thighs and it's warm, which somehow makes it worse, and you can feel things floating in it, bumping against your legs. The pump is a simple hand crank device, and you start working it, and the water slowly begins moving up through the pipe and out through the side of the ship. And you pump and pump and pump in the near total darkness. There's one lantern down here, but it barely illuminates anything. And after 20 minutes, your arms are burning, and after an hour, you're not sure you can continue, but you do, because stopping means admitting weakness, and weakness gets you killed or abandoned. And while you're pumping in the darkness, you see them, rats. Not small rats, but rats the size of cats, swimming through the bilge water, completely at home down here in the festering darkness. One of them swims right past your leg, and you try not to scream, because the old pirate who's down here supervising you, making sure the new guy doesn't shirk his duty, laughs and says, "Rats are good, means there's still food on board. When the rats leave, that's when you worry." 2 hours of pumping in the bilge, and when you finally climb back up to the gun deck, you smell like death, and your clothes are soaked with bilge water, and you will never, ever feel clean again, no matter how much you try to wash in seawater later. This is pirate democracy. The freedom to vote on where you sail, the obligation to pump bilge water when you're the new guy. Both are true, both are part of the same system. Welcome to the account.
Before we follow you through the rest of this day, before we get to the violence and the disease and the combat and all the other horrors waiting in the hours ahead, I need you to do something. If you're lying there thinking, this is already so much worse than I imagined, hit that subscribe button right now, because it gets worse. So much worse. We haven't even gotten to the amputation yet. We haven't seen combat. We haven't experienced what happens when someone gets seriously injured on a ship with no real medical care. Drop a comment telling me, would you have lasted even one day as a pirate? Because I'm genuinely curious how many of you would have made it past breakfast. And stay tuned, because we're about to meet the surgeon, and you're about to understand why ship surgeon was a job that required you to be drunk all the time just to cope with what you had to do. Your first morning as a pirate is almost over. You've eaten weevils, drunk green water, pumped bilge for 2 hours, and discovered that the romantic pirate myth is comprehensively false. And the day is just getting started. Let's see what the afternoon brings.
9 o'clock in the morning, and you've cleaned yourself up as best you can with seawater. There's no fresh water for washing. That's only for drinking, such as it is. And you're standing on the main deck with the rest of the crew, waiting for what the old hands call sick call, which is when the ship's surgeon deals with anyone who's injured or ill enough to need attention. You're about to witness something that will haunt you for the rest of your life, however long that turns out to be. Samuel, the surgeon, sets up his station on deck because there's more light up here than below, and he's already drunk at 9 in the morning, but his hands are steady enough, and you'll learn that he stays just drunk enough to cope with what he has to do, but not so drunk he can't do it. His surgical kit is laid out on a table, saws of various sizes, knives, needles and thread for stitching, a leather strap for patients to bite down on, and a bottle of rum that's not watered down like the crew's ration. That rum is the only anesthesia available on a pirate ship in 1721. The first patient is a man named John who got a rope burn on his hand 3 days ago during a storm, and the burn got infected, and now his whole hand is swollen and red with black streaks running up his arm, and you can smell the infection from 6 feet away, that sweet rotten smell that means the flesh is dying. Samuel examines the hand for maybe 10 seconds and then says flatly, "It's got to come off. The rot's spreading. Another day and it'll be in your blood and you'll be dead." John starts to protest, but Samuel cuts him off. "Hand or your life, mate. Choose quickly." John chooses life.
4 men hold John down on the deck, 1 on each limb, because there's no anesthesia except the rum that John drinks as fast as he can, a whole bottle straight down. And then Samuel gives him the leather strap to bite on and picks up his saw. What happens next is something that no movie ever shows you because it's too horrible, too real, too viscerally disturbing for entertainment. Samuel positions the saw just above John's wrist, and he starts cutting, and the sound is worse than you could have imagined. The rasp of metal teeth on bone, the wet sound of flesh parting, and over it all, John screaming, even through the leather strap, a high-pitched animal sound that doesn't even sound human. The 4 men holding him down have to use all their strength because John is thrashing with a power that comes from pure agony, trying to get away from the saw that's cutting through his wrist, but they hold him, and Samuel keeps sawing, and you can see the blood pooling on the deck, bright red in the morning sunlight. It takes 8 minutes. 8 minutes of sawing and screaming and the smell of blood and the sound of bone being cut through, and when Samuel finally gets through the wrist and the hand comes off, just falls onto the deck with a wet thud, you turn away and vomit over the rail, empty your stomach of the weevil biscuit and salt beef and green water, and you're not the only one. Several other crew members who've never seen an amputation before are vomiting too, and the old hands are watching with expressions that aren't quite sympathy and aren't quite contempt, just a kind of grim acceptance that this is what happens on ships, this is the price of infection, this is normal. Samuel works quickly now, tying off the blood vessels with thread, stitching the flesh closed over the stump, wrapping it in cloth that's been soaked in rum to help prevent more infection, though he doesn't know why rum helps, just that it does. John has passed out from the pain, which is actually better for everyone, and when Samuel is done, he wipes his saw on his pants and moves on to the next patient.
The next patient is a man with advanced scurvy, and you can tell immediately because his gums are black and swollen and bleeding. His teeth are loose in his mouth, and when he opens his mouth to show Samuel, you can see that several teeth are actually falling out, just coming loose from the rotted gums. His skin has a grayish-yellow tinge, and there are dark purple bruises all over his arms and legs from blood vessels breaking under the skin. And he's got open sores that won't heal because his body has lost the ability to repair itself. This is what happens when you don't get vitamin C for months at a time. Though Samuel doesn't know anything about vitamins, that discovery is still decades away. He just knows that men who don't eat fresh fruit or vegetables eventually get scurvy, and then they die. There's no treatment. Samuel gives him some of the ship's lime juice ration, which is supposed to prevent scurvy and sometimes helps if you catch it early enough, but this man is too far gone. He'll probably die within the month. Samuel tells him to avoid hard foods since his teeth are falling out anyway, to rinse his mouth with salt water, and to hope for the best. That's all he can do. The man nods and shuffles away, and everyone knows they just watched a dead man walking.
The third patient has gonorrhea from the last port stop, from one of the prostitutes in Port Royal, and his symptoms are exactly as disgusting as you'd expect. And Samuel's treatment is mercury, applied directly to the affected area, which will probably kill him slower than the disease would, but at least it's doing something. Mercury is poison, but it's the only treatment anyone knows for syphilis and gonorrhea in 1721. And Samuel administers it with the same grim efficiency he applies to everything else, and the patient limps away, knowing he's probably going to die, but at least someone tried to help.
You spend the rest of the morning thinking about what you just saw. The amputation playing over and over in your mind. The sound of the saw on bone, John screaming, the hand falling to the deck. And you realize something that the pirate recruiters never mentioned. You could be John. Any rope burn, any small cut, any minor injury that gets infected in this environment where everything is dirty and contaminated and there's no way to keep wounds clean, any of that could lead to you being held down on this deck while Samuel saws off your hand or your foot or your arm. There are no antibiotics. There's no understanding of germ theory. Infection is essentially random and essentially unstoppable once it gets bad enough. And amputation is the only option. An amputation without anesthesia is torture, that you survive or you don't. This is part of why pirate life expectancy is 2 years. Not just combat, though combat is dangerous enough, but disease and infection and accidents and all the accumulated ways your body can fail you on a ship where there's no real medical care and the surgeon is a drunk barber who learned his trade from a book. You look at your hands, at the blisters you've already developed from pumping the bilge this morning, and you wonder if those blisters could get infected. And you realize they absolutely could. And you understand that you're going to have to be incredibly careful about every injury from now on, because any wound could be the one that leads to Samuel's saw. This is what they don't tell you when they recruit you with stories about freedom and treasure. They don't mention that freedom comes with a very high probability of dying screaming on a deck while someone cuts off pieces of you.
11 o'clock, and it's time for a combat drill. And this is where you learn what pirates actually fight with, and it's nothing like the movies. The quartermaster, a man named Davies who's missing 2 fingers on his left hand from a previous battle, lines up the crew and starts distributing weapons for practice. And the first thing he hands you is a cutlass. Not the elegant rapier you were imagining, not the gentlemanly sword for dueling, but a short, heavy, brutal chopping weapon designed for close quarters combat on a crowded ship deck. The cutlass is maybe 2 feet long, with a curved blade and a simple handguard, and when you hold it, you can immediately tell this is a tool for hacking, not for finesse. Davies demonstrates the basic technique. Short, powerful chops aimed at arms, legs, neck, anywhere you can hit to disable or kill an opponent as quickly as possible. Forget everything you've seen about sword fighting, Davies says. This isn't a duel, this is butchery. You're trying to chop through bone and meat as fast as you can so you can move on to the next man. Aim for the limbs if you want to disable. Aim for the neck if you want to kill. Don't waste time on fancy moves. Hack and move. That's all it is. You practice swinging the cutlass at a suspended piece of wood, and within 10 minutes your hands are blistering and your arms are burning, and you're starting to understand that actual combat with this thing would be exhausting and chaotic and nothing like the choreographed duels you've seen in port when rich men fight for their honor.
But Davies isn't done destroying your illusions about pirate combat. He moves on to firearms, and he explains that in real pirate battles, firearms come first, not swords. He shows you a flintlock pistol, a heavy single-shot weapon that takes a full minute to load and prime and can only be fired once before you have to reload, which is impossible during combat, so you get one shot and then the pistol becomes a club. He demonstrates loading it, measuring out the powder, pouring it down the barrel, add the ball, tamp it down, prime the pan with more powder, cock the hammer, and he fires it at a target on the rail. And the sound is enormous, and the smoke is thick and acrid, and your ears are ringing. One shot, Davies says, make it count.
Then you club them with it, or you drop it and switch to the cutlass. Most men carry 2 or 3 pistols, so they get multiple shots before resorting to the blade. He shows you a blunderbuss, which is essentially a handheld cannon, a short-barreled gun with a flared muzzle that can be loaded with anything: lead balls, nails, glass, rocks, whatever you have. And when fired, it sprays all of that in a wide pattern that's devastating at close range. This is for boarding, Davies explains. You fire this into a group of men and you'll kill or wound 4 or 5 of them. Then you drop it and pull your cutlass because you won't have time to reload. And then he shows you the weapon that pirates actually rely on most during boarding actions: grenades. Not the modern fragmentation grenades you might be thinking of, but clay pots filled with gunpowder and metal scraps, nails, broken glass, bits of chain with a fuse sticking out the top. You light the fuse and throw it onto the enemy deck, and it explodes and sends all that metal flying in every direction, killing and maiming anyone nearby. We throw a dozen of these onto their deck before we even board, kill as many as we can, wound the rest, create chaos and fear. Then we board while they're still confused and bleeding, and we finish them with cutlass and pistol. This isn't honorable combat, this is efficient killing. The faster we kill them, the fewer of us die. That's all that matters. You practice throwing weighted bags to simulate the grenades, and you practice the basic cutlass moves until your arms feel like they're gonna fall off. And you fire a flintlock pistol once, and the recoil nearly breaks your wrist, and the powder burns your hand. And you understand that combat with these weapons is going to be loud and confusing and terrifying in ways you never anticipated. This isn't the elegant piracy of stories. This is throwing explosives to maim people, and then rushing in to hack them with heavy blades and shoot them at point-blank range, and beat them with pistol butts if they're still moving. Davies ends the drill with a piece of advice that sums up pirate combat philosophy. Most ships surrender when they see the Jolly Roger because they know what happens if they fight. If they do fight, we kill them as fast and as brutally as possible to send a message to the next ship: surrender or die screaming. Fear is our best weapon. Remember that. You think about John screaming during his amputation this morning, and you think about the grenades full of nails and glass, and you think about hacking at people with the cutlass, and you realize that even if you survive your first battle physically, you're not going to be the same person afterward. Violence changes you. Everyone knows that. And pirates engage in violence regularly, efficiently, brutally, because that's the job. That's what you signed up for when you signed the articles. You're not a rebel or an adventurer or a freedom fighter. You're a professional killer who happens to work on a ship. That's the truth that Hollywood never shows you. 1 o'clock and it's time for the midday meal, and you discover with a sinking feeling that it's exactly the same as breakfast. Weevil-infested ship's biscuit, salt beef so old and hard it's barely edible, and green water from the barrel. No variety, no fresh food, just the same rations over and over, because this is what keeps on a ship for months at sea. You eat mechanically, biting through weevils without flinching now because you're already adapting, already becoming the kind of person who can eat insects without caring, because the alternative is hunger. The rum ration was consumed this morning, and there's no more until tomorrow morning, so you're stuck with the green water for the rest of the day. And you're desperately thirsty because the work this morning, the bilge pumping, the combat drill, has left you dehydrated in the Caribbean heat, but the water tastes so bad that you can barely force it down. One of the older pirates notices you struggling and says, "Get used to it. Sometimes we go weeks without rain and the water gets worse than this. I've drunk water that was brown with rot and thick enough to chew. This is actually pretty good water by comparison." You look at the green liquid in your cup, and you think about drinking water that's worse than this, and you genuinely don't know if you can do it. But you'll have to, because thirst doesn't care about your preferences, and if the water supply runs low, you'll drink whatever's available, or you'll die of dehydration. This is another thing they don't tell you when they recruit you. Pirates spend a lot of time being thirsty, being hungry, being hot or cold or wet or sick, and there's nothing you can do about any of it except endure. The freedom to vote on where the ship sails doesn't change the fact that you're drinking green water full of algae and eating weevils and waiting for scurvy to set in. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and there's a shout from the lookout in the crow's nest. Sail spotted on the horizon. The entire crew comes alert immediately, because this is what you're here for. This is what pirate ships do, to hunt other ships. And everyone crowds to the rail to look at the distant sail, trying to determine if it's a merchant vessel worth attacking or a naval warship to avoid. Captain Roberts climbs up to the quarterdeck where he can see better, examines the distant ship through his spyglass for several long minutes, and then calls for a crew vote. This is it. This is the pirate democracy you heard about, the thing that makes pirate ships different from every other ship at sea. The entire crew gathers on deck, and Roberts addresses you all. Merchant ship, single mast, probably carrying sugar or molasses from Barbados. Light escort, maybe 10 guns. Crew of 30 at most. We can take her easily, and her cargo's worth maybe 200 pounds if we sell it in the right port. But attacking means risk. They might fight back. We might take casualties. The Navy might be in the area and hear the cannons. So we vote. All in favor of attacking. Hands go up all across the deck. You raise your hand too, because you're not going to be the one man who votes against attacking on your first day. That's a good way to get labeled a coward. Roberts counts quickly and says, "All opposed?" 3 hands go up, to older pirates who've seen too many battles and aren't enthusiastic about another one. "Motion carries," Roberts announces. "We attack at dusk. Prepare the ship." And just like that, democratically, the crew has voted to potentially kill 30 men and steal their cargo. This is pirate democracy. Everyone gets a vote, majority rules, and even the captain only gets 1 vote like everyone else. It's more democratic than most governments in 1721, more egalitarian than any merchant or naval ship, and it's being used to decide whether to commit robbery and possibly murder. Both things are true. Pirates offer genuine equality and genuine violence, and you can't separate one from the other. This is the complexity that the simple stories ignore.
4 o'clock, and the crew is preparing for battle. And this is where you learn another myth-shattering truth. Pirates don't fly the Jolly Roger all the time. Right now, the Royal Fortune is flying a British flag, the Union Jack, because flying false flags is standard practice. You approach your target while pretending to be something harmless, get as close as you can, and only at the last moment do you raise the Jolly Roger to terrify them into surrendering without a fight. Davies explains this while he's helping you load your weapons for battle. The skull and crossbones isn't decoration, it's psychological warfare. We raise it when we're close enough that they can see it clearly, and in that moment they have to make a decision, surrender and live, or fight and probably die. Most crews surrender because merchant sailors aren't paid enough to die defending cargo that doesn't belong to them. The flag does our fighting for us most of the time. He hands you a flintlock pistol, just one. You're too inexperienced to be trusted with more than a cutlass, and a grenade, a clay pot that sloshes with liquid and rattles with metal pieces when you shake it. When we get close, Davies instructs, Roberts will give the signal. We raise the Jolly Roger, we shout the surrender demand, and we wait to see what they do. If they fight, you light that grenade and throw it onto their deck. Try not to hit any of our own men with it. Then you board when the order comes. You fire your pistol at the first enemy you see, and then you switch to the cutlass and you do what I taught you. Hack, don't fence. Questions? You have 1,000 questions, but your mouth is too dry to ask them, and besides, what would you ask? How do I avoid dying in my first battle? There's no good answer to that. You survive or you don't. That's all there is.
Roberts gathers the crew one more time before the attack, and he gives a speech that's nothing like the dramatic captain's speeches in stories. He's blunt and practical. We want them to surrender. Surrender means we get their cargo without losing any men. Fighting is expensive. We lose crew. We lose time treating wounded. We risk damage to our own ship. So when we raise the colors and demand surrender, we want them to believe we'll slaughter them if they fight. That's why we have a reputation for brutality. That's why stories about Blackbeard and Calico Jack and all the rest include details about torture and violence. Those stories make other ships surrender faster. So if they do fight, if they're stupid enough to resist, we make it hurt. We make it memorable. We make sure the survivors have a story to tell that will terrify the next crew we approach. Understand? We prefer surrender, but if we have to fight, we make it worth it by ensuring the next ship doesn't fight. You understand.
You understand that pirate brutality isn't about sadism or evil, it's about efficiency. The more brutal your reputation, the less often you have to actually fight. Fear is a weapon, maybe the best weapon pirates have, because it makes ships surrender without combat. But that means when you do have to fight, when a crew is brave or stupid enough to resist, you have to make it so terrible that the story of what happens spreads and terrifies other crews. It's calculated, it's strategic, it's absolutely horrific. And it's about to happen in approximately 2 hours when the sun sets and the Royal Fortune closes with that merchant ship on the horizon. You're holding your pistol and your cutlass and your grenade, and your hands are shaking, and you're about to discover what it's like to kill someone. And you realize with a strange clarity that you're more afraid right now than you've ever been in your entire life. But there's no way out. You voted for this. The crew voted for this. Democracy has spoken. And in pirate democracy, you live and die by the vote.
Before we follow you into battle, before we watch what happens when the Royal Fortune closes with that merchant vessel and the violence begins, I need you to do something. If you've made it this far and you're still with me, still invested in Thomas's first day as a pirate, hit that like button right now. And drop a comment telling me, what myth about pirates are you most surprised to learn is false? Is it the food, the medicine, the combat, the fact that they actually voted democratically on decisions? I want to know what shocked you the most. And subscribe, because the battle we're about to witness is nothing like the movies, nothing like the sanitized action sequences, nothing like the heroic adventures. This is going to be ugly and fast and brutal, and you're going to understand why even pirates preferred it when ships surrendered. The sun is setting. The Royal Fortune is closing on her target, and in the next section, you're either going to survive your first pirate raid or you're going to die on your first day. Let's find out which.
6 o'clock, and the sun is touching the horizon, turning the Caribbean Sea orange and red, and the Royal Fortune is close enough to the merchant vessel now that you can see individual men moving on her deck. She's exactly what Roberts said, a small single-masted sloop, probably 40 feet long, riding low in the water, which means she's carrying cargo. And you can see maybe 15 men on deck, which means she's undermanned for a fight. The distance between the two ships is closing fast because the Royal Fortune is bigger and faster, and you're gripping your weapons so tightly that your knuckles are white, and your heart is hammering in your chest so hard you think everyone can hear it. Roberts stands on the quarterdeck with one hand on the wheel and the other shading his eyes, judging distance, timing the approach perfectly. At 50 yards, he raises his hand and shouts, "Colors!" and 2 crew members haul down the British flag and run up the Jolly Roger black flag with white skull and crossbones, and the effect on the merchant crew is immediate and visible even from this distance. You can see them pointing, shouting, running in different directions, confusion and fear spreading across their deck like fire. Roberts cups his hands around his mouth and bellows across the water, "Merchant vessel! This is the Royal Fortune under Captain Bartholomew Roberts. Strike your colors and prepare to be boarded. Resist and we give no quarter." His voice carries clearly across the gap between ships, and for a long, terrible moment, everything is suspended, waiting to see what the merchant captain will do. Will he fight? Will he surrender? Your finger is on the fuse of your grenade, your other hand is on your pistol, and you're waiting for the order to light the fuse and throw, and then everything will be chaos and violence and death. The moment stretches, and then you see it. The merchant ship's flag coming down. They're surrendering. They're not going to fight. Relief floods through you so powerfully that your legs almost buckle, and you realize you were absolutely terrified of what was about to happen, and the fact that it's not going to happen now feels like a reprieve from execution. No battle, no killing, no grenade throwing, no cutlass hacking, no watching men die. They surrendered. This is the outcome Roberts wanted, the outcome every pirate wants, because fighting is expensive and dangerous and unnecessary when fear can accomplish the same goal.
The Royal Fortune pulls alongside the merchant vessel, and grappling hooks are thrown to bind the two ships together, and then the boarding begins. You cross from one deck to the other with the rest of the crew, your weapons still ready, because surrendered crews can sometimes change their minds and fight anyway, but these men are clearly beaten. They're standing in a group on their own deck with their hands visible and their weapons on the ground, and their captain, a middle-aged man in a coat that's seen better days, is standing slightly apart with his ship's manifest in his hands, ready to hand it over. Roberts boards first, as is his right as captain, and he takes the manifest and reads it quickly. "Sugar and molasses," he announces to his crew. "About 8 tons total, worth maybe 200 pounds in the right port. Not a bad haul." He turns to the merchant captain and says, almost conversationally, "Your cargo is forfeit, and your ship is forfeit. Your crew has a choice. Join us or take your chances in your boats. We'll give you water and biscuits to reach the nearest port, about 2 days' sail west of here. Those who join us will sign our articles and be treated as equals with equal shares. Those who leave will leave now. Decide quickly." This is standard pirate procedure. Give the captured crew the option to join, because pirates always need replacements for men lost to disease and combat and desertion. Most merchant sailors don't join. Pirate life is brutal, and most men know it. But a few always do, usually the ones who've been treated worst by their merchant captains, the ones who've been beaten or cheated on their wages, or who just can't stand the thought of going back to the merchant service after having tasted even this brief moment of being treated as equals rather than property. 3 men step forward to join the pirates. The rest, 12 men and the captain, are ordered into the ship's boats with water barrels and biscuit and given directions to the nearest port, and then they're cut loose and left to row away into the dusk while the Royal Fortune crew begins the work of transferring the cargo. This is your job now, hauling heavy barrels of molasses and sacks of sugar from the merchant hold to the Royal Fortune's hold. Back-breaking work in the last light of day, sweating in the heat that doesn't diminish just because the sun is setting. You haul cargo for 2 hours and your back and arms and legs are screaming, and you're covered in molasses from a barrel that cracked and leaked, sticky and disgusting and attracting every insect in the Caribbean. When the cargo is finally transferred, when the merchant vessel has been stripped of everything useful, food, water, weapons, rope, canvas, anything that can be used or sold, Roberts makes a decision about the ship itself. "Burn her," he says flatly. "She's too small to be worth keeping and too slow to be useful. Fire her and let's move on." And you watch as crew members pour lamp oil across the merchant ship's deck and light it, and within minutes the whole vessel is engulfed in flames, burning against the darkening sky, a beacon that can probably be seen for miles. This is a message too. We were here, we took what we wanted, we left nothing behind. The burning ship will eventually sink, leaving no evidence except the stories that the 12 men in the boats will tell when they reach port. Stories about Bartholomew Roberts and the Royal Fortune that will spread and make the next merchant crew more likely to surrender. Everything pirates do is calculated to enhance their reputation for brutality and efficiency. Nothing is wasted, not even violence. 7 o'clock, and the cargo has been transferred and the burning merchant ship is sinking behind you, and it's time for the division of spoils. And this is where you discover another disappointing truth. There is no buried treasure, and your share of this raid is almost nothing. The cargo is worth about 200 pounds if it's sold in the right port, but that's the value of 8 tons of sugar and molasses, and converting it to actual money requires finding a buyer who will take stolen goods, and that buyer will pay maybe half the actual value. So the real profit from this raid is about 100 pounds. And that 100 pounds gets divided according to the articles that you signed, the articles that specify exactly how shares work. Captain Roberts gets 2 shares because he's captain. The quartermaster gets 1.5 shares because he's second in command. The surgeon gets 1.5 shares because medical skills are valuable. The gunner and the carpenter get 1.5 shares each because ships need those skills to function. Everyone else in the common crew, which includes you, gets 1 share each. With a crew of 120, the math works out to roughly £1 per crew member, minus the extra shares for officers, which means your actual pay from this raid is about 15 shillings. 15 shillings for a day of work that included pumping bilge, combat training, preparing for battle, transferring cargo, and the very real possibility of dying in combat. That's about 3 weeks' wages for an honest laborer, so it's not nothing, but it's also not the fortune you were imagining when you thought about pirate treasure. And you won't even see this money immediately because it only gets paid out when the cargo is sold, which could be weeks or months from now, depending on when the Royal Fortune reaches a port with buyers for stolen sugar. And when you do get paid, you'll spend it in about 3 days on alcohol and prostitutes and gambling and anything that helps you forget the horror of this life. And then you'll be broke again and hunting for the next prize. This is the economic reality of piracy. You risk your life constantly for occasional small payouts that you spend immediately because you might die tomorrow, so why save for a future you'll probably never see? No buried treasure, no retirement plan, just hand-to-mouth existence punctuated by violence.
But at least the raid went well. At least no one on the Royal Fortune was killed or injured, which means no more amputations tonight. Which means you don't have to watch Samuel see through anyone else's limbs while they scream. Except that's not quite true, because while you were hauling cargo, one of the crew members fell between the ships as they ground together in the waves, and his leg got caught between the 2 hulls, and when the ships rolled apart, his leg was crushed below the knee, shattered so badly that the bone is sticking through the skin and the foot is pointing the wrong direction. His name is Peter, and he's 24 years old, and he's screaming as they carry him onto the deck. And you know what's coming next even before Samuel starts laying out his instruments. Another amputation. Another leg sawed off while the patient screams and 4 men hold him down. You don't want to watch, but you can't look away. And Samuel works quickly because he's done this a dozen times, and the saw goes through bone and flesh, and in 10 minutes Peter has lost his leg below the knee, and he's passed out from the pain, and Samuel is sewing the stump closed, and you're standing there thinking that could have been you. One wrong step, one moment of bad timing, and you'd be the one with a stump instead of a leg. And your life as a pirate would be effectively over, because a one-legged man can't climb rigging or work sails or fight effectively, which means the best you could hope for is being put ashore at the next port with your share of the loot and left to beg or starve. This is what happens to injured pirates. There's no disability pay, no retirement, no safety net. You work until you can't work anymore, and then you're discarded. Peter might survive the amputation. The survival rate is maybe 50-50 depending on whether infection sets in, but even if he survives, his days as a pirate are over. He's 24 years old, and his adventuring career just ended because a wave pushed 2 ships together at the wrong moment. After the amputation, you're assigned to cleanup duty, which means swabbing the blood off the deck where Samuel performed his surgery. There's a lot of blood, more than you would have thought one leg could hold, and it's already starting to dry in the tropical heat, getting sticky and dark, and you're on your hands and knees with a brush and a bucket of seawater scrubbing it away while trying not to think about Peter's screaming, or John's screaming from this morning, or the fact that you've now witnessed 2 amputations on your first day as a pirate, and there will probably be more before you die or desert or get captured and hanged. The blood comes off the deck slowly, reluctantly, leaving dark stains in the wood that will never fully disappear. And you think about how many men have bled on these planks, how many amputations and injuries and deaths this deck has witnessed, and you wonder if the whole ship is soaked with blood if you go deep enough into the wood. You're bone tired now,
exhausted from the work and the stress and the fear and the heat, and your hands are blistered and bleeding from the bilge pump and the cutlass practice and the cargo hauling, and you smell like bilge water and molasses and sweat and blood, and you realize this is what you smell like now. This is what pirates smell like, and you'll never be truly clean again, no matter how much you wash with seawater. This is your life now. This is what you signed up for, and it's only been one day. You have to survive maybe 700 more days like this before you hit that average 2-year life expectancy, and you genuinely don't know if you can do it. But you don't have a choice. You're here. You signed the articles. You're a pirate now. All you can do is survive one day at a time and hope the odds favor you.
9 o'clock, and it's time for the evening meal. And you know what's coming before you even line up with the rest of the crew. Ship's biscuit with weevils, salt beef that's barely edible, green water from the barrel. The same food you had for breakfast and lunch, the same food you'll have tomorrow and the day after, and every day until you reach port or die or the food runs out entirely. You eat mechanically, too tired to care about the weevils, too thirsty to care about the taste of the water. And you sit on the deck with your back against the rail and you look up at the stars that are starting to appear in the darkening sky. And you think about how beautiful they are and how indifferent they are to your suffering. The old pirates around you are talking about the raid, discussing it with the casual expertise of men who've done this dozens of times, analyzing what went right and what could have gone wrong, and what they'll do with their 15 shillings when they finally get paid. No one mentions Peter, except to say that Samuel did a good job with the amputation, fast and clean, and that Peter might survive if the infection doesn't set in. No one seems particularly bothered by the fact that a 24-year-old man just lost his leg. This is normal. This is what happens on pirate ships. You get injured, you get amputated, you survive or you don't, and either way, life goes on for everyone else. The man sitting next to you, the one with 6 teeth who you met this morning a lifetime ago, offers you some advice. The first day is always the worst, he says. You're learning that nothing is like the stories, but you'll get used to it. The food, the smell, the blood, all of it. You'll get used to it or you'll die, and either way, the problem solves itself. He grins at his own joke, and you manage a weak smile in return, and you think about how horrible it is that you'll get used to it or you'll die is genuinely the most optimistic thing anyone has said to you all day.
10 o'clock, and it's time to sleep. And you climb down to the gun deck and find your hammock and lower yourself into it. And the lice immediately start biting, and you're too tired to care. You're surrounded by 120 other men in hammocks that touch yours, all of them snoring or coughing or groaning, and the smell of unwashed bodies and bilge water rises up from below. And somewhere someone is vomiting, and somewhere else someone is having a nightmare and shouting in their sleep. And this is where you'll spend every night for as long as you're a pirate. You close your eyes and you try to sleep, but your mind won't stop replaying the day. The weevils in the biscuit, the bilge water around your legs, John's hand falling to the deck, the grenades full of nails and glass, the Jolly Roger going up the mast, the merchant ship burning, Peter's leg being sawed off, the blood you scrubbed from the deck. 24 hours ago, you were a merchant sailor who thought joining the pirates would be an adventure, would be freedom, would be treasure and excitement and rebellion against authority. Now you know the truth. This is disease and hunger and violence and fear and exhaustion, day after day after day, until you die or get captured or desert if you can find a way. But you also know something else, something more complex that the simple stories never capture. This is also democracy. You voted today on whether to attack that ship. You had the same vote as Captain Roberts, the same vote as every other man on this crew, and that's genuine equality, genuine voice in your own fate, something that most men in 1721 will never have. The merchant sailors you robbed today don't get to vote on where their ship goes or what it does. Naval sailors get beaten for disobedience and have no say in anything. But you, a pirate, you get to vote.
And for men like Marcus who escaped slavery, for men who've been beaten and abused by merchant captains, for men who have no other options in a world that offers them nothing, this horrible life is still better than the alternatives. That's the truth that makes piracy possible. Even this nightmare is an improvement for the men desperate enough to choose it.
You lie in your lice-infested hammock thinking about democracy and violence and the fact that both are real, both are true, both are part of the same system. And you're too exhausted to figure out what that means, or whether you made the right choice, or whether you'll survive long enough for it to matter. Your hands hurt from the blisters and the bilge water and the blood scrubbing. Your arms hurt from the bilge pump and the cargo hauling. Your head hurts from dehydration and bad water and stress. You smell like death, and you're covered in insect bites, and you're going to wake up in 6 hours and do it all again. Same food, same work, same danger, day after day after day. This is your life now. This is what it means to be a pirate. And tomorrow, when you wake up, you'll do it again. Because what other choice do you have? You signed the articles. You're committed. You're one of Bartholomew Roberts' crew now, part of the most successful pirate operation in the Caribbean, and you'll either adapt to this life or you'll die trying, and those are the only two options. The hammock sways with the motion of the ship, and you can hear the waves against the hull, and someone nearby is crying quietly in the darkness. And you think about the 2-year life expectancy, and you wonder if you'll make it even that long. And finally, mercifully, exhaustion pulls you down into sleep. Your first day as a pirate is over. You survived it. Most men do survive the first day. It's all the days after that kills you. Welcome to the account. Welcome to the reality behind the myth. Welcome to the life you chose when you believed the romantic stories about pirate freedom and treasure. Tomorrow you'll wake up and learn even more truths that Hollywood never shows you. But for now, for tonight, you sleep and dream of clean water and fresh food and a world where your hands don't hurt and people don't scream while surgeons see through their bones. Dreams are free at least. That's one thing pirate life doesn't take from you.
Before we leave you sleeping in your hammock and move to the final reflection on what you've learned, I need you to do one more thing. If you've made it through Thomas's entire first day as a pirate, if you've survived the weevils and the bilge and the amputations and the reality check about what pirate life actually was, hit that subscribe button, because I'm going to keep destroying historical myths with deeply researched narratives like this one. And here's what I want from you in the comments. Tell me what historical topic you want me to cover next. Viking raids from the Viking perspective, a day in a Civil War field hospital, a medieval torture chamber, a night in a trench during World War I, a day in an ancient Roman slave's life. Tell me what myth you want me to destroy, what historical reality you want to experience, what time period you want to visit through immersive storytelling. I'll read every comment, and I'll pick one randomly, and that will be the next video. So comment now before you drift off to sleep. And speaking of sleep, let's end Thomas's story properly. Let's talk about what he learned, what we learned, and why you should be grateful you're lying in a clean bed in the 21st century instead of a lice-infested hammock in 1721. The final reflection is coming up, and then you can sleep peacefully, knowing you survived a day in the Golden Age of Piracy without actually having to live it. Good night is coming, but first, the truth about what we just experienced.
4 o'clock in the morning, and someone is shaking your hammock again, shouting, "On deck, you lazy dogs!" And you wake up to the same smell, the same lice biting you, the same darkness, and the same groaning man around you. And you realize with a sinking feeling that this is day 2, and it's going to be exactly like day 1, except you're already exhausted, and your hands are already blistered, and you already know what's waiting for you. Weevil biscuit, green water, bilge pumping, the constant possibility of injury and amputation, and the slow accumulation of damage to your body that will eventually kill you in approximately 700 more days if you're average, less if you're unlucky, more if you're extraordinarily fortunate and careful.
Thomas Miller, age 19, former merchant sailor, new pirate, survived his first day aboard the Royal Fortune. Most men do survive the first day. It's not the first day that kills you. It's the accumulated days, the diseases that build in your body from bad food and bad water, the injuries that fester because there are no antibiotics, the battles that eventually catch up with you, the tropical fevers, the accidents, the scurvy that rots your gums and loosens your teeth, the infections from minor cuts that turn into amputations, and all the 1,000 ways that life on a pirate ship in 1721 can kill you before you reach 21. Thomas will get up now and climb to the main deck and eat his weevil biscuit and drink his green water and pump the bilge or haul cargo or scrub the deck or whatever work needs doing. And he'll do it again tomorrow and the day after. And either he'll adapt and become the kind of person who can eat insects without flinching and watch amputations without vomiting and kill men with grenades and cutlasses when the situation requires it, or he'll die and be replaced by another desperate 19-year-old who believed the myths about pirate freedom and treasure. Both outcomes are equally likely. That's the reality of pirate life expectancy. So let's talk about what Thomas learned in his first 24 hours as a pirate, what myths died and what truths emerged, because you've just spent the last 50 minutes experiencing the reality that Hollywood never shows you. First, the myths that are completely false. There is no buried treasure. Pirates spend their money immediately because they might die tomorrow, so why save for a future that probably won't come? There are no walking planks. That's a complete invention. It never happened. Pirates killed people or set them adrift in boats, but they never made anyone walk off a plank because that would be a waste of time and planks. The food is not feasting in rum all day. It's weevil-infested biscuit and rotten salt beef and water so contaminated it's green, with 1 cup of watered-down rum in the morning that barely gives you a buzz. The sleeping quarters are not private cabins. They're hammocks touching other hammocks in a space that smells like a sewer and crawls with parasites. The combat is not elegant sword dueling. It's throwing grenades full of nails to maim people and then boarding while they're still bleeding and hacking them with cutlasses in the most efficient way possible. The medical care is not gentle and professional. It's amputation without anesthesia performed by a drunk barber while 4 men hold you down and you scream until you pass out. The life expectancy is not long retirement on a tropical island. It's 2 years on average before disease or combat or capture kills you. Every romantic thing you've ever heard about pirates, every adventure story, every movie depiction, almost all of it is lies designed to make an unbearable existence seem appealing. That's what Thomas learned. That's what you learned by following him through his first day. But here's the complexity that makes pirate history genuinely interesting rather than just horrifying. Some of it is true. Democracy is real. Thomas voted today on whether to attack that merchant ship, and his vote counted exactly as much as Captain Roberts' vote. And that's genuine equality in an age where most men have no voice in their fate whatsoever. The articles that Thomas signed are real contracts that specify exactly how shares are divided and what the rules are and what happens if you break them. And those articles apply to everyone equally, captain and crew alike. If Roberts becomes incompetent or tyrannical, the crew can vote him out and elect a new captain, and that actually happens on pirate ships regularly. This is more democratic than most governments in 1721. More egalitarian than any other ship at sea. And for men like Marcus, who escaped slavery, this is the only place in the entire world where a black man can vote as an equal with white men and receive equal shares and be judged on his competence rather than his skin color. That matters. That's not nothing. The fact that it comes with weevil biscuits and disease and violence doesn't erase the fact that it's still genuine freedom and genuine equality for men who had neither. And that's why men chose this life despite knowing how horrible it was. They knew. The recruiters couldn't completely hide the reality, and men who'd been at sea heard stories from other sailors, and they signed the articles anyway, because even this nightmare was better than the alternatives available to them. Better than slavery, Better than the brutal discipline of naval service, where you could be flogged to death for minor infractions. Better than merchant service, where captains could beat you and cheat you on wages and you had no recourse. Better than starving on land with no job and no prospects. For desperate men with no other options, pirate life offered something valuable enough to be worth the horror. A voice, a vote, a share, a chance. That's the truth about pirate life that both the romantic myths and the simple horror stories miss. It's not adventure and treasure and freedom without cost, but it's also not simple evil or insanity. It's desperate men making rational choices given terrible options, choosing the horrible life that at least offers them dignity and voice over the horrible lives that offer them nothing but submission and abuse. Thomas made that choice. Thousands of men made that choice during the Golden Age of Piracy from roughly 1650 to 1730. Most of them died young and poor and diseased, but they died as free men who'd had a say in their own fates, and for men in 1721, that was worth the price. You don't have to make that choice. You're lying in a clean bed right now with clean water available whenever you want it. You can see a doctor if you're sick, and that doctor has antibiotics and anesthesia and centuries of medical knowledge that Samuel the drunk ship surgeon never dreamed of. You can eat food without insects in it. You can drink water that isn't green with algae. You can expect to live into your 70s or 80s instead of dying at 21. You have all of this not because you're better or smarter or braver than Thomas, but because you were born in a time and place where human civilization has progressed to the point where these things are normal rather than impossible luxuries. You should be grateful for that. You should appreciate the clean water and the modern medicine and the fact that if you get an infected cut, you can take antibiotics instead of having someone saw off your hand. You should be grateful that you don't have to choose between different kinds of horror, that you have options that don't all involve suffering and early death.
Now let the story go. Let Thomas wake up to his second day aboard the Royal Fortune and face whatever that day brings without you. He's not real. He's an amalgamation of dozens of real pirates whose stories are documented in trial records and ship logs and contemporary accounts. But as an individual, he's fictional. But the life he lived today, the experiences he had, the food he ate and the water he drank and the work he did and the violence he witnessed, all of that is as historically accurate as I could make it based on primary sources from the Golden Age of Piracy. That's what it was really like. That's the truth behind the myths. And now you know, and hopefully you'll never watch a pirate movie the same way again, because you'll remember the weevils and the bilge and the amputations and the 2-year life expectancy and all the things that Hollywood carefully edited out of the adventure. Close your eyes now. Pull up those clean blankets that don't have lice in them. Drink some water if you're thirsty, and appreciate that it's clear and clean and safe. Touch your hands and appreciate that all your fingers are still attached and there's no infection threatening to cost you a limb. You're safe. You're comfortable. You're living in a time when pirate life is entertainment rather than desperate necessity. Sleep well, knowing that you survived a day on a pirate ship without actually having to live it, and wake up tomorrow grateful for antibiotics and democracy that doesn't require you to risk death by grenade to participate in it. The Golden Age of Piracy is over. The men who lived it are long dead. Their ships are rotted and gone. But their story remains, and now you know the truth of it, the horrible, complex truth that's so much more interesting than the simple myths. Good night, sleep peacefully, and remember, the past was worse than you think, which makes the present better than you appreciate. Rest well.